Da-da-da. Oh, much better. Hello there. I didn't see you. So we are very excited to work on these headlights for Suppy at Hoonigan. Let me show you what he sent us. So these are Mark IV pre-facelift headlights. The housings, but the inserts are post-facelift. So let's talk about that for a minute, because it's an integral part of what's going on here. Can't wait for 4th of July, man. That's right, baby. The time has come, boys and girls. We're gonna celebrate with a little bit of sales. So we will be doing our sale from the 30th, this Thursday, to the 5th, which is next Tuesday, on products similar to these. Check them out, and I'll see you guys in the emergency room. Woo! So the prescription for these headlights was going to be a projector upgrade in the low beam. In the high beam, we're gonna do the Infinity Q45. It's like a 7 lens projector. From the factory, this is a low beam only projector, but because it's going in the high beam area, that's why we're doing a bi-xenon projector swap in the low beam section. So the low beam will be the low and high beam. The high beam is now just gonna be it'll still be functional, just not as a low beam. We're just gonna have it as like an accessory light. These are full carbon fiber housings, and what he wanted us to do is do a satin clear coat, which you can see here. We already did that. We also had these aluminum rings machined, and we also had them nickel plated by Ogden Chrome in Utah. Jose is one of our very good customers that works there. He did an awesome job. So this front end is done, but to get it to this point, we didn't film that because we thought it was like a hush-hush thing. But we did want to show you guys kind of some behind the scenes. So like I said, the headlights here, I believe these are the pre-facelift. They have this like huge cockpit window. This is for like a running light. There's the fog light projector, and then the low beam, high beam. These housings here are for the newer version, I'm pretty sure. I should have probably looked this up all before. But as you can see, that whole section here is missing. This did have a larger bezel that came out further. We had to remove that in order to fit the high beam piece that's gonna go inside there. So we had to remove a lot of carbon fiber for that to fit. But it fits nice and snug there. And then also, in order to get this to sit inside the front lens, the housings that these were made for, the lens goes over further, so it allows for, like, there used to be like probably a ½ inch more material here. These ones don't have that pocket, so we had to kind of cut all this down and make sure it looks nice and clean. And then we went around the entire outside just with a hand brush, and I just did black paint around that to kind of hide any sort of cuts that we made before we did the clear coat. So these came out really, really nice. I'm very glad, because it was quite nerve-wracking cutting up carbon fiber in the hopes that this would fit, but it does, so that's good. So pretty much we're on to like the meat and bones of this project, which is going to be fitting this into the high beam. So this projector, there's a bowl that goes in the back where a D2S bulb sits. Even without that bowl, you can see like how thick these are. Thick. So fitting this into this very shallow headlight is just, it wasn't gonna work. We would have had to cut the back of this out. You can see right here, the opening between the low and high beam is maybe 5 or 10 millimeters. And if we look at this projector here, which sits flush with this, this is like 2 or 3 inches further out. So there's just no way that this was gonna fit in there comfortably. So rather than trying to cut the back out and do this kind of weird patch job like I know some headlight retrofitters are comfortable with doing, and it just doesn't look good to me, we just slimmed this down a whole bunch, and we're just going to kind of make this work with what we have. Like I said, my plan is to, on the back of this, mount a mirror plate and then LEDs. So it'll still have all 7 of these light up, and the mirror in there on the backing will kind of like help refract light around, bounce it around. But you can see here, compared to that other one, this one is pretty much exactly where we need it to sit depth-wise. I still do need to cut a little bit more off of it, but that's what we're about to go into right now. So the other part of this that was a little troublesome is the bracket. So we have these projector bracket conversion pieces. So typically there is a vendor, custom bracket design. They do like really nice brackets. They didn't have one for this model. There was one guy on a Supra forum in Australia that made brackets for these cars, the Mark IVs. So I was able to email him and get in touch, and I did buy a few brackets for just different projector variations, and just I wanted to have some on hand if we were to do this again. Little did I know that the projector bracket between the pre and post facelift is slightly different. So those were nice to have, but they don't fit. They were to fit like this style that this front housing is for, but the backing is really a lot different. So we ended up having to make these ourselves. Jake that works here did all the design in-house, and I think they came out really great. They're bent perfectly, everything fits up, as you can see, full adjustment, everything is set. I wanted to just buy them. You know when you buy something that's done? Didn't happen. But anyways, they're done now, and we have them, which is cool. So I don't think anyone else makes these brackets except for us. So if you need them, holler. At this point, we have the bracket in there. We know it fits. We test fitted this housing. And as you can see, I don't have the low beam ring on this one yet, but on this side you can see the carbon fiber is just visible on the inside of this. The cool thing about these rings is on the back side it's actually convex, so it kind of sits right on this ridge here, and then for the high beam. So when we line this up where it's going to sit, you can see this low beam is really snug in there. It's quite perfectly aligned. So I'm really happy with the fitment on this. There is enough room on the top and bottom where if Suppy needs to adjust them up or down, he's not going to have any clearance issues. We are going to test that as well just to make sure before. But you can see there's probably 1 millimeter or 2 surrounding the whole thing. So yeah, just super flush, super clean. Once we get the ring on there, it's going to hide a little bit of this bezel as well. But yeah, very happy with the fitment on these. So the next tough part for this is going to be getting this to sit inside the high beam. So once again, this housing being a little different than the backing, the opening for this is not centered with the opening on the backing. So what I did was, rather than use this opening here to try to center this, I put the housing on the front just like it would sit in the headlight, and then I just took a Sharpie and marked the halfway point horizontally and the halfway point vertically. So that should give us kind of like a target to aim for the center of this piece here. Woo. Now that I have that, I'm just going to do a quick mock-up once again. What I'm going to plan to do this next step is get this centered. I'm going to drill the holes for the hardware that will hold this to the bracket, and then just do a quick mock-up with the front housing just to make sure that this is centered for that opening and I don't need to adjust it up or down. Once we have that in there and it fits here, we're gonna go ahead and put the rings on this. This front part will be completely done. At that point, it's just gonna be finishing this up, making sure this illuminates nice and evenly, and then yeah, putting them together. Whoa. Jiggle, or does it fold, dude? All right, so test fitting it now. Let's see what she looks like. So she is close. You can see like right here, we have some contact. So that's just one part where I'm just gonna sand down slightly. Besides that, it's looking good. It's just tight. It's very tight in there. But because a lot of this is covered up by that ring, it's a little bit of a rough cut. So I can remove more material. The only thing we have to make sure we keep are these 2 screw holes. So this one's really close. A little nerve-wracking, but I should be able to get away with that. And then up here, I can take a little bit of this down. Let's go ahead and do that. The thing that I am going to do before we finalize any fitment is I'm gonna put this front housing in the front outer lens and then put that on the headlight. This housing sits in there from the factory. That's how it's designed. So I'm putting this right against the headlight, which should give us a good idea of fitment. but because it sits in the lens, it might actually sit a little further out, which would help us in this case. So yeah, let's go ahead and trim these parts that we need to, get fitment so everything's fitting nice here. That way when we put this front housing in the outer lens, if it does give us a little bit of wiggle room, it's only better for us. No more touching. So now we removed a little of the carbon fiber that was in the way. Everything checks out. There's no more contact, which is great. So at this point, we're gonna go ahead and permanently, well, for now, fix this to the bracket just so we know exactly where it's gonna sit. We are back to another beautiful day in the shop here. So where we left off, just making some more room on that housing for this high beam. Even after that, we're kind of realizing that this outer radius is still just a bit too large for that. And more importantly, the depth of it, with this larger ring on the front housing being smaller, well not smaller, but a little smaller than the outer diameter of this, it's just gonna be a little too close for comfort. So we are gonna recess this back further. So instead of mounting this on the front of our bracket that we made, we're gonna mount it on the back side. That'll give us a bit more room for what we're trying to do, and if there does need to be like any adjustment, like height adjustment, it just gives us that little bit of extra margin so we know it's not gonna touch. So at this point, I'm gonna remove this bracket again. I marked off where we have to cut off in order to fit this on the back side and go from there. In the meantime, I am gonna go ahead and glue the rings on that front housing. Now that we know that we're gonna have that back spacing, this should be just fine. So we're gonna go ahead and do that. So I just finished polishing these rings. I have the low beam one mocked up, fits well, chose the right size hardware as far as depth goes. And now what I'm gonna do is just add a little bit of silicone. We obviously have the mechanical bond of the screws in the rings, but it's always nice to have a little bit of extra something. And I think for the silicone, we like using that because the road vibrations, that'll just help absorb some of that so it doesn't kind of chip away at the carbon fiber over time. So low beam one is on. The silicone we filled in, like I said, the bottom of the back side, I should say, is convex. So we just kind of put a little bead in there, put it on, and nice and smooth. The high beam location is a little different. This one, only the top half has that kind of gutter for us to be able to do that. So for this one, we're actually gonna go ahead and fill in this whole bottom. You won't be able to see it from the back, but just having that bit of extra adhesion there is gonna help us in the long run, longevity wise. But yeah, overall, very clean install. These are really fun to work with. Turn you. These are gonna dry, and we'll see you tomorrow. We're back the next day. Look at these boys. So the silicone is dry and these are gleaming. So just to summarize what we worked on here, we mounted the projectors for the low beam. What we actually ended up doing was rear mounting these in the end. The fitment was a little bit too tight. It fit perfectly in the low beam, but if he had to adjust them up or down at all, it'd be very close to touching, and we don't want that. So what we ended up doing was just rear mounting these projectors just to give us a couple extra little millimeters of clearance, and that should be perfect. At this point, the next step is going to be modifying these brackets to fit the high beam. We thought we'd be able to do those on the front as well, but just like the projector, we want a little bit of extra room for those. Next time we're gonna modify these, we're gonna mount those up, and from there, they should be able to come together. So stay tuned, and these bad boys wrapped up.